Hey guys, tonight we're going on a treasure hunt. No, not the fun kind with a map where X marks the spot on a sunny beach. We're heading back to the 16th century, to a place buzzing with rumors, greed, and some truly questionable navigation choices. We're going to search for the 7 cities of gold. This is a story about how a wild goose chase can become an epic, life-altering journey, just usually not in the way you'd hope. The odds of us finding a city paved with gold are, well, let's just say the odds of us getting lost in a desert are significantly higher. You might not make it past the first month, realistically. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It lets me know you're out there, listening in the dark. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments what city you're listening from, and what time it is there. It's always a strange comfort to know we're all in this quiet moment together, scattered across the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air in Mexico City feels different. It's the late 15-20 seconds, and the dust of the old Aztec capital still seems to hang in the streets, mingling with the scent of Spanish cooking fires on new construction. You're here. You made the treacherous journey across the Atlantic, chasing promises of a new life, of opportunity, of wealth. But you were just a little too late for the main event. The name on every owner's lips is Hernan Cortés. HES, the man who, with a handful of soldiers, toppled an empire just a few years ago. You see the men who fought with him strutting through the plazas, their armor glinting, their purses heavy. They got the jackpot. They were there when Montezuma's treasury was thrown open, revealing a hoard of gold that still fuels whispers and legends across the ocean. You, on the other hand, are standing on the sidelines. You're a settler, maybe a low-ranking soldier with a rusty sword, or a hopeful merchant who sold everything back in Spain for a ticket to the New World. You missed the big party, and now you're left sweeping up the confetti, wondering if there are any scraps left. Every conversation in every tavern seems to circle back to the same topic. Was the Aztec Empire a one-time miracle? Or was it just the beginning? Surely, you tell yourself, a continent this vast can't have just one pocket of immense wealth. There have to be others. Another Tenochtitlan, maybe one that's even bigger. One evening, nursing a cup of cheap wine, you listen to a grizzled old priest talking to a young, ambitious captain. The priest is a scholar, his hands stained with ink, not blood. He says the idea of 7 hidden, wealthy cities isn't new. He tells a story that has nothing to do with this new land. An old Portuguese legend from the 8th century. When the Moors invaded the Iberian Peninsula, he explains, 7 brave bishops refused to live under their rule. They gathered their followers and all the sacred treasures they could carry, and sailed west, out into the great, unknown Atlantic, the Sea of Darkness. Legend says they landed on a mythical island called Antillae, and there they each founded a magnificent city, a safe haven, a repository of old faith and, presumably, old gold. The priest muses aloud. What if they didn't land on an island? What if their ships were blown further, and they landed right here, on this massive new continent, centuries ago? It's a passing thought for him, a historical curiosity. But for the captain listening and for you, eavesdropping the idea is a spot. Native peoples from the north, captured and questioned, have sometimes spoken of large settlements, way up in the uncharted lands. Their descriptions are vague, filtered through a dozen layers of translation and misunderstanding. But now, this old European myth gives those vague native rumors a name and a shape: the 7 cities. Cheoble. You look at the faces around you. The fever is catching. Do they truly believe it? Do they honestly think a band of 8th-century Portuguese bishops are the ancestors of a native kingdom of untold wealth? Or is it just a convenient story? A narrative so compelling it could convince the viceroy, and even the king back in Spain, to fund a massive, incredibly expensive expedition into the unknown. The line between genuine faith in a miracle and calculated ambition is impossibly thin here. It's a question historians still debate. Were these men driven by sincere delusion, or was it all just a cover for a ruthless land grab? Standing there, you can't decide. All you know is that the whispers are getting louder. The dream of the North is taking root, and you realize, with a nervous flutter in your stomach, that you're starting to believe it too. The whispers of the 7 cities are still just that, whispers. A ghost story told over wine. But then, a real ghost story begins to unfold, and it starts with a name. You've heard of him. H.E.S., one of those figures spoken of with a mix of pity and scorn. A cautionary tale. He was Cortez's rival, a man who tried to arrest Cortez in the middle of the Aztec conquest and ended up losing an eye for his trouble. Well, years ago, in 1527, this same Narváez, ever ambitious, convinced the king to grant him a charter to conquer and govern Florida. Not the sunny retirement peninsula we know, but a vast, terrifying, unknown chunk of the continent north of the Caribbean. You remember when the news of his expedition reached Mexico City. It was a grand affair. 5 ships, 600 men, horses, priests, wives, and colonists. They sailed from Spain with all the pomp and arrogance of an empire that believed it had a divine right to any land it touched. They were going to establish 2 new towns and 3 fortresses. They were going to succeed where others had failed. Then, after they landed, somewhere near modern Minas State, Tampa Bay, they vanished. Complete silence. A year passes. Then 2. Then 5. Then 8. The entire expedition is written off. Swallowed by the swamp. Lost to disease, starvation, or the native tribes they had so casually planned to subjugate. La Florida becomes a cursed name, a place where Spanish ambitions go to die. The story of Narváez serves as a grim reminder that the New World doesn't give up its secrets, or its lands, easily. Then, one day in 1536, everything changes. A reporter rides from Culiacan, a tiny, remote Spanish outpost on the Pacific coast, far to the northwest, a slave miners' raiding party, scouring the frontier for people to capture, stumbled upon something impossible. Not a lost city, but 4 lost men. 3 of them were Spanish, the other an African. They were described as looking like wild creatures. Their beards were down to their chests, their hair matted and impossibly long, their skin burned black by the sun and scarred by thorns. There were almost nothing and carried strange gourds filled with pebbles. When the slavers tried to speak to them in Spanish, the men struggled, their tongues clumsy with a language they had barely used for years. For weeks, their story is all anyone can talk about. It's an epic of suffering and survival that makes even the most hardened conquistador shudder. Shipwreck, starvation, enslavement by native tribes. But then the story takes a bizarre turn, a detail that feels almost too strange to be true. To survive, these 4 men didn't fight their way across the continent. They healed their way across it. Somewhere along their journey, desperate and starving, they were asked by a native tribe to cure their sick. Cabeza de Vaca, in a moment of desperation, simply mimicked the methods of the local medicine men. He made the sign of the cross over the sick, breathed on them, and prayed in Latin. And, incredibly, the people got better. Word spread. They were no longer seen as pathetic castaways, but as powerful shamans. Holy men sent from the sky. They were passed from one tribe to the next, not as prisoners, but as revered guests. For years, they walked across what would one day be Texas and northern Mexico, with an ever-minus growing entourage of native followers, performing miracles with their sacred gods and their Christian prayers. This strange detail is one of the most debated parts of their tale. Were they genuine faith healers? Was it a series of coincidences? Or were they simply clever performers who understood that power to heal was more valuable than any sword in this new land? As you listen to the retellings of their official report to the Viceroy, you lean in closer, waiting for the part that really matters, the goal, the truth. But it's not that simple. They are careful with their words. They say they never saw these places themselves, but they heard things. They tell of passing through lands where the people had cotton blankets and permanent houses. They were given gifts of turquoise, and some arrowheads that they were told were made from emeralds. And far to the north, they heard rumors from the natives about enormous settlements, cities with houses that were 4 or 5 stories high, where the people were wealthy and wore fine clothes. They don't call it Chiobal. They don't call it the 7 cities. They just repeat what they heard. But that's enough. The Viceroy hears multi-story houses and his mind pictures palaces. He hears turquoise and emeralds and imagines a new Peru. The vague, second-hand accounts of these for traumatized survivors are twisted and magnified by the desperate imaginations of men like you. The old Portuguese legend of the 7 bishops, the vague native rumors, and now this incredible, first-hand story of survival are all melting together into one thrilling, intoxicating possibility. The dream now has a direction north. The weeks that follow the survivors' return are a blur of excitement and speculation. You can't walk through the Plaza Mayor without hearing their names. The official report they deliver to the Viceroy is a guarded, carefully worded document, but the stories that spill out in private conversations, retold and embellished in taverns and barracks, are far more vivid. It's in these informal retellings that the wilderness to the north transforms from a terrifying green void into and a shimmering possibility. You find yourself piecing the story together from these fragments, trying to separate the truth from the tavern talk. The 3 Spaniards, Cabeza de Vaca, Castillo, and Durance are the heroes of the hour, but they are also exhausted and weary. They've seen enough of the northern wilderness to last a lifetime. In their official testimony, they stick to what they can verify. Yes, they saw natives wearing cotton. Yes, they were given gifts of turquoise. Yes, they heard stories of towns with tall houses. But they always add a disclaimer: this is what they were told. It's a classic case of plausible deniability. They are planting a seed without taking responsibility for the tree that might grow from it. But Cabeza de Vaca, in particular, understands the power of a good story. Soon after, he will write his own account, a book that will become a sensation back in Europe. His version is filled with harrowing escapes, profound spiritual experiences, and keen observations of the native peoples he encountered. He describes their customs, their food, their social structures, and this is where historians still argue. Was Cabeza de Vaca a sort of accidental, early-day anthropologist, genuinely trying to document the world he saw with as much accuracy as a 16th-century European could muster? Or was he a master of self-promotion, carefully crafting a narrative that would paint him as a heroic, almost saintly figure, deserving of a new governorship or a royal pension? The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in the murky middle. What truly captures the imagination of people like you, however, are the specific, unbelievable details. The story of the Malaco Sar, a strange, bearded evil spirit that the natives said would terrorize their villages, and how Cabeza de Vaca's prayers drove it away, or the astonishing account of him performing what sounds like modern surgery. He describes being both a man who had an arrowhead lodged in his chest, near his heart, with a simple knife. He claims he cut open the man's chest, carefully removed the arrowhead, and stitched the wound shut with a bone needle. The man survived. True or not, these are the tales that build the legend. And then there's the gold. It seems like a trivial detail, but it was the key to everything. At some point in their journey, the survivors were given a sacred rattle made from a gourd, decorated with feathers. To the tribes they encountered, this gourd was a symbol of immense spiritual power. Carrying it was like carrying a diplomatic passport and a doctor's license all in one. They would shake it as they approached a new village, and the people, instead of meeting them with arrows, would greet them with reverence and offer them their best food and shelter. Filled with pebbles, it's a strange and wonderful bit of history for 8 years. The most powerful object on the North American continent wasn't a sword or a cross, but a noisy gourd held in the hand of a shipwrecked Spaniard. The Viceroy, Antonio de Mendoza, listens to all of this with intense interest. He's no fool. He.S. a shrewd politician who understands the difference between a campfire story and a sound investment. But the pressure on him is immense. Every other rival power in the New World seems to be finding their own Peru. He needs a victory. He needs a new source of wealth to secure his own legacy and to keep the thousands of restless, unemployed young men like you from causing trouble in Mexico City. The story of the 4 survivors is the best Lady G.S. ever had. He summons the 3 Spaniards and makes them an offer while they lead a small expedition back north to verify the rumors. All 3 refuse, unequivocally. They are done with that life. Castillo and Durant settle down, marry wealthy widows, and fade into comfortable colonial life. Cabeza de Vaca will eventually return to Spain to lobby for his own governorship. But the viceroy has one more card to play. There was a 4th survivor, someone who wasn't a Spanish gentleman, someone whose property, Durant's, owned the slave, Estevanico, and when the viceroy makes Durant's an offer to purchase him, Durant agrees. Estevanico, the man from Morocco, the first African to cross North America, has no say in the matter. He is going back. The viceroy, Mendoza, is a patient man, but even he is starting to feel the dream slip away. The 3 Spanish survivors have refused his offer. You see them in the city, enjoying their newfound status, but they show no desire to return to the harsh wilderness they just escaped. The energy in the city begins to wane. The grand prospect of a new Peru to the north is starting to feel like yesterday's news. But Mendoza is a chess player, and he has 1 piece left on the board. A piece he doesn't have to ask, but can command. Estevanico. You see him around the Viceroy's palace. HES no longer just Durant's personal slave. HES now a valuable asset of the state, purchased for a handsome sum. There's a strange irony in it. In the wild, he was a demigod, a healer whose presence commanded respect and tribute. Here, in the heart of New Spain, he is once again property, a man whose fate is decided in a business transaction. But he is a unique kind of property. He is the only man in all of Mexico City, perhaps the world, who knows the way back. He knows the trails, the languages, the customs. He knows which tribes are friendly and which are hostile. And he knows how to use the sacred gourd. Estevanico is not a Spaniard. He's a Moor, from the coastal town of Azee, Dem Hemawer in Morocco. HES, seen a world beyond Spain in the New World. He likely speaks multiple languages, not just Spanish and the various native tongues he picked up, but Arabic, maybe even some Portuguese. He is, by all accounts, worldly, intelligent, and incredibly charismatic. He survived the Narváez expedition not just by luck, but by being adaptable. He learned to become whatever he needed to be: a slave, a forager, a medicine man, a diplomat. Pendel, the viceroy, is going to make him a scout. But Mendoza has a problem. He can't just send a slave out to claim vast new territories for the Spanish crown. It wouldn't be proper. Any discovery, any claim, must be made by an official representative of Spain and the Turk. He needs someone to accompany Estevanico, someone whose testimony will be seen as unimpeachable. He needs a priest. His choice lands on a friar named Marcos de Niza. Fray Marcos is, on the surface, the perfect candidate. He's a Franciscan, part of an order known for its vows of poverty and its missionary zeal. He seems humble, pious, undedicated. But he also has something else on his resume. He was in Peru during the early days of the conquest there. He saw the wealth of the Incas. He knows what a native empire looks like. And more importantly, he knows the kind of gold and silver it can possess. This experience makes him both an expert and, perhaps, dangerously susceptible to wishful thinking. Historians have argued about Fray Marcos for centuries. Was he a naive, honest man of God who was simply out of his depth and easily fooled? Or was he a shrewdly ambitious cleric who knew exactly what the viceroy wanted to hear and was willing to stretch the truth to make a name for himself? The plan they devise is a masterpiece of caution and hope. It won't be a large, lumbering military expedition. This will be a reconnaissance mission. Fray Marcos will be the official leader, accompanied by another friar and a small entourage of native allies. And Estevanico will be their guide. More than a guide, he will be their vanguard, their scout, their everything. He is to go ahead of the main party, sometimes by several days' journey, to smooth the way and investigate the rumors. They work out a clever communication system. Estevanico is instructed to send back messengers with crosses. The size of the cross would indicate the magnitude of his discoveries. If he found something of little importance, he would send back a cross the size of a man's hand. If it was a discovery of some significance, the cross would be larger, and if, the viceroy instructed, he found something truly spectacular, a city richer and larger than Tenochtitlan itself, he was to send back a great cross, as tall as a man. You watch them prepare to leave, this strange pair destined to walk into legend. Fray Marcos in his simple, coarse brown robes, clutching his crucifix, a symbol of the spiritual empire he hoped to build. And then there's Estevanico. He doesn't dress like a slave anymore. He embraces the persona that kept him alive for 8 years. He adorns his arms and ankles with bells that jingle as he walks. He carries feathered gourds, the symbols of his shamanic power. He is said to have gathered an entourage of his own, including beautiful native women who follow him willingly, and a pair of large greyhounds that walk at his side. He is not just a guide. He is a spectacle, a one-man parade. He is returning to the north not as a castaway, but as a celebrity. The friar is the official leader, but everyone knows who is really in charge. The fate of the entire enterprise, the dream of the 7 cities, rests on the shoulders of this enslaved man from Morocco. The expedition begins, and almost immediately, you see the strange dynamic between the friar and the guide play out. Fray Marcos proceeds slowly, methodically, following the viceroy's instructions to the letter. He stops in villages, preaches through interpreters, and makes careful note. Estevanico, on the other hand, is a force of nature. He seems to shed the last vestiges of his enslavement the moment he leaves the Spanish outpost behind. He is no longer just a guide. He is the character he created during his 8-year ordeal, the holy man, the healer, the unstoppable envoy of the gods. He plunges ahead of the friar's small, cautious party. He is to keep a distance of 50 or 60 leagues, a journey of several days. As he goes, he gathers his entourage. Natives are drawn to his charisma, his jingling bells, his stories, and the promise of protection and status that comes from being with him. His party swells to include not just admirers, but also a mobile treasury of gifts he receives: turquoise, blankets, and other valuables. He is a whirlwind of activity, sweeping through the landscape, while Fray Marcos plods along in his wake. The system of the crosses begins to work. At first, a messenger arrives for the friar bearing a cross the size of a hand. The news is encouraging. Estevanico has made contact with people who have seen the northern cities. Fray Marcos sends his thanks back and continues his slow, prayerful advance. A few days later, another messenger appears, this time with a cross the size of a man's forearm. The stories are more detailed now. The destination has a name: Pueblo. It is said to be the first and smallest of 7 cities, but still a place of great size and wealth. The friar's heart begins to beat faster. This is more than he could have hoped for. He urges his own party onward, his slow pace quickening with anticipation. And then it happens. A messenger comes running, breathless, carrying a cross as tall as a man. Fray Marcos' breath catches in his throat. This is the signal, the ultimate signal. The messenger, a native man who has been with Estevanico, speaks in hurried, excited tones. Estevanico hasn't seen Pueblo yet, but he is close. He has met people who have come from there. They confirm everything. The houses are multiple stories high, made of stone and mortar. The doorways are decorated with turquoise. The people are wealthy beyond imagination. The messenger relays Estevanico's own words: hurry. This is the greatest thing in the world. For Fray Marcos, this is the moment of divine confirmation. All the whispers, all the legends, all the viceroy's hopes, they are all true. He offers a prayer of thanks and pushes his party forward relentlessly, desperate to catch up, to see it with his own eyes. He is no longer just on a mission. He is on a pilgrimage to a holy land of gold. He travels for days, following the path Estevanico blazed. He finds the villagers where his guide was treated like a king, and they welcome the friar as well. Assuming he is another powerful figure from the same tribe, they offer him food and shelter and tell him more stories about the wonders of Chiobel. The excitement is almost unbearable. He is on the very cusp of a discovery that will dwarf that of Cortés. Then, just as he reaches the edge of the great, uninhabited desert that is the final barrier before Chiobel, he sees a figure stumbling toward him. This is not one of Estevanico's confident messengers. This man is one of the native guides from Estevanico's own party. He is bleeding. His clothes are torn. His face is a mask of pure terror. He is soon joined by two others, equally wounded and panicked. The story they tell, choking back sobs, makes the friar's blood run cold. Estevanico had arrived at Chiobel. The city was real. It was a town called Hoykuh, the first of the Zuni pueblos. But he was not welcome. He approached with his usual flair, shaking his sacred gourd, expecting the people to bow down as all the others had. But the Zuni elders were different. They examined his gourd and, according to their oral tradition, recognized its markings as belonging to a tribe that was their enemy. It was a declaration of war, not peace. They were immediately suspicious. Who was this man? His skin was dark, yet he claimed to be an emissary for white men who were following him. It made no sense. His demands for tribute, for turquoise, and, according to the Zuni, for women, were seen as outrageously arrogant. They did not see a holy man. They saw a spy, a charlatan, a threat. They took him into the village and held him for questioning. They stripped him of his feathered ornaments and the other gifts he carried. The next morning, according to the survivors, Estevanico tried to flee. The Zuni warriors pursued him, raining arrows down on him and his followers. Estevanico, the great shaman, the man who had survived shipwreck and 8 years in the wilderness, was shot down and killed. His grand entourage scattered, hunted through the desert. The exact circumstances of his death are lost to a fog of conflicting accounts. The Spanish version, filtered through a terrified friar, is vague. The Zuni oral history provides more justification, painting Estevanico as an arrogant and dangerous intruder. Historians still debate the precise trigger for the violence. Was it the gourd? Was it a demand for women? Or was he simply the first casualty in a clash of cultures that was destined to turn violent? Whatever the reason, the result was the same. The vanguard was dead, and Fray Marcos was now alone, just a few days' march from a city that had proven it was not made of gold, but of stone, and was defended by men who were not about to bow to a cross of any size. The news of Estevanico's death hits the small camp like a physical blow. The native guides who had accompanied Fray Marcos are terrified and furious. Their friends and relatives who had joined Estevanico's glamorous entourage are dead or scattered. They look at the friar, this strange man in a brown robe, and they see him as the source of all this misfortune. They begin to talk amongst themselves, their voices low and angry. They had led him here, trusted him, and in return, he had brought death to their doorstep. You can almost feel the weight of their resentment settling on the friar's shoulders. For a moment, his own life hangs in the balance. Fray Marcos has a choice. The logical, sensible thing to do would be to turn around immediately and flee back to the safety of New Spain. The mission is a catastrophic failure. His guide is dead. His escort is on the verge of mutiny, and the city he sought has revealed itself to be hostile. But if he goes back now, what does he have to show for it? Nothing. Just a dead slave and a pile of expenses for the viceroy. He will be a laughingstock. The friar who got duped and lead his men to ruin. His ambition, whether holy or personal, wars with his fear. He gathers what remains of the turquoise and blankets he had been given as gifts along the way and distributes them among his terrified guides. It's part appeasement. Part brave. He begs them to take him just a little bit further. He doesn't need to enter the city. He just needs to see it. He has to lay his own eyes on Chiobel, so he can say he was there. After much persuasion, 2 of the native chiefs agreed to go with him, while the rest wait behind, still simmering with anger. This is the most contested moment in the entire story. the part of Fray Marcos' official report that has been debated for nearly 500 years. He claims that he and his two guides climbed the hill that overlooked the city of Hoy-Kuh. He describes what he supposedly saw from this distant vantage point, and what he describes is not a humble Pueblo village made of mud and stone. He paints a picture of a magnificent city. It is larger than the city of Mexico. He would later write, he describes it as gleaming in the desert sun, a city of tall, orderly stone buildings. From a distance, he says, it looked to be a great and powerful place, the smallest of 7 even greater cities that lay beyond it. He doesn't mention gold, not directly. He is too clever for that. But by comparing it to Mexico City, the jewel of the Spanish Empire in the America, she implies everything. Historians and archaeologists are almost unanimous on this point. He was either lying, or he was experiencing one of the most profound optical illusions in history. Hoy-Kuh, which has been excavated, was a moderately sized Zuni pueblo. It was an impressive feat of architecture for the region, a multi-storied communal dwelling, but it was in no way comparable to the sprawling metropolis of Tenochtitlan. So what happened on that hill? Did he even go? Some historians argue he panicked and fled, inventing the entire sighting to cover his failure. Others suggest a more charitable interpretation. Perhaps, in the shimmering heat of the desert afternoon, the sun reflecting off the mica-flecked plaster of the Pueblo walls made it glitter, making it look larger and more brilliant than it was. Maybe, consumed by fear and wishful thinking, he simply saw what he so desperately wanted to see. It's the ultimate unreliable narrator problem. There were only 3 people on that hill, and only one of them left a written record. We are forced to see Chobal through the eyes of a terrified, ambitious friar who had every reason to exaggerate. He claims he stood there, gazed upon the city, and then performed a quiet act of possession. He built a small pile of stones, planted a wooden cross on top, and formally claimed the entire land Chobal, the 7 cities, and all the kingdoms beyond for the Spanish crown. Then, he writes, he turned around with much more fear than food and began his race back to civilization. His journey back is affronted. Desperate flight. He doesn't stop. He barely eats. He expects at any moment to feel an arrow in his back, but the Zuni do not pursue him. He rejoins the angry remainder of his party, and they hurry south, their fear of the Zuni outweighing their anger at the friar. He finally stumbles back into Culican, the same frontier town where the 4 survivors had emerged years earlier. He is exhausted, gaunt, but he is not empty-handed. He carries with him a story. And not just any story. He carries the story of a city, grand and gleaming, a place he compares to the greatest city in the New World. He has failed to bring back Estevanico, but he has succeeded in bringing back the dream, and he has made it bigger, brighter, and more tantalizing than ever before. When Fray Marcos returns to Mexico City, he is no longer a man fleeing in fear. He is a prophet. You see him being escorted to the Viceroy's palace. His simple brown robes now a symbol of his humble courage. The city is electric with anticipation. He gives his official report to Viceroy Mendoza behind closed doors. But soon the details are leaked, perhaps strategically, to the public, and the story is even better than anyone imagined. The friar, under the Viceroy's careful coaching, begins preaching from the pulpits of the city as churches. He tells the story to packed congregations of wide-eyed soldiers, merchants, and settlers like you. He speaks of the great city he saw from the hill, Chobal. He uses the magic words larger than the city of Mexico. This is the detail that seals the deal. It's a brilliant piece of marketing. Everyone standing in Mexico City can look around and see its grandeur, the stone buildings, the cathedrals, the bustling markets. To imagine a city even larger than this, lying untouched in the north, is intoxicating. He talks about houses of stone and lime, 10 stories high. He mentions doorways studded with turquoise. He confirms the existence of not just one city, but 7, and beyond them, even greater kingdoms. Does he believe his own story by now? It's impossible to say. Perhaps in the constant retelling, the line between his fearful glimpse and his glorious vision has blurred entirely. The academic question of whether he intentionally deceived the viceroy or was a victim of his own delusion becomes irrelevant. The story is too good not to be true. The city taverns are filled with men sketching imaginary maps on tables, calculating the potential loot. The price of swords and armor begins to creep up. The gold fever that had simmered for years now erupts into a full-blown inferno. Viceroy Mendoza knows this is his moment. He has his proof. He has his eyewitness. He now has the political capital. He needs to launch the expedition he has dreamed of. This will not be another small, cautious scouting party. He envisions a grand army, a full-scale military conquest that will bring the entire northern continent under his control. But who can lead such an enterprise? He needs someone loyal, someone competent, and someone with enough personal wealth and status to command respect. He doesn't have to look far. His choice falls upon his close friend and protege, Francisco Vázquez de Coronado. You know Coronado. HES, a rising star in the colonial administration. HES, not some grizzled, hardened conquistador from the first wave of conquest. HES, younger, from a noble but not fabulously wealthy family in Salamanca, Spain. He came to the New World with Viceroy Mendoza and, through a combination of charm, competence, and a very advantageous marriage to the wealthy daughter of the colonial treasurer, he has done very well for himself. He is currently the governor of Nueva Galicia, the northern frontier province where Fray Marcos reappeared. He is perfectly positioned. Coronado is the epitome of the second-generation colonial elite. He is educated, ambitious, and hungry to make a name for himself that will rival that of Cortés. He listens to Fray Marcos's report not with skepticism, but with the boundless optimism of a man who sees his destiny laid out before him. He sees a chance to step out of the viceroy's shadow and become a legend in his own right. When Mendoza offers him the command, he accepts without hesitation. And here's a little detail you might overhear in the discussions about financing. This isn't just a Royal Minas-funded project. It's a massive private investment, a 16th-century venture capital gamble. Viceroy Mendoza sinks a fortune of his own money into it. Zaro silver ducats, an astronomical sum. Coronado, leveraging his wife's enormous dowry, invests nearly as much. They become the primary shareholders in the new enterprise. Think how the wealthy colonists clamor to buy shares, investing in horses, armor, and supplies in exchange for a promised cut of the immense profits. They are betting their entire fortunes on the word of a single friar. It's a testament to the power of the dream he is selling. The Spanish crown offers its blessing and some administrative support, but the financial risk falls squarely on the investors. Failure would mean not just disgrace, but financial ruin for some of the most powerful men in New Spain. The decision is made. The wheels are set in motion. Notices are posted, calling for volunteers, men from all over Mexico, and even new arrivals from the Caribbean and Spain, begin streaming towards the assembly point. The Great Northern Expedition is happening, and Francisco Vázquez de Coronado, the dashing young governor, will be its captain-general. The dream has found its champion. The call goes out, and you answer. This is it. The opportunity you've been waiting for. The one that makes missing out on the Aztec conquest feel like a blessing in disguise. That was Cortés' story. This one will be yours. You sell what few possessions you have: a plot of land, a set of tools. Maybe you even go into debt, borrowing against a future that seems paved with gold. You acquire a helmet, a rusty breastplate, and a sword that's seen better days. If you're real lucky and have some money, you buy a horse, instantly elevating your status and your potential share of the loot. If not, you're a foot soldier, ready to march your way to riches. You make your way to Compostela, the capital of Nueva Galicia and the designated assembly point for the expedition. As you approach the town, you realize the scale of this enterprise is beyond anything you could have imagined. Compostela is bursting at the seams. It's a chaotic, vibrant, sprawling military camp. The sound is a constant din, the clang of blacksmiths' hammers repairing armor, the neighing of thousands of horses, the bleating of an immense flock of sheep, and the grunting of pigs that all serve as a walking food supply, the chatter of hundreds of Spanish soldiers, and the murmur of more than 1,000 native allies who have joined the cause. You are now part of one of the most formidable armies ever assembled in the New World. The final count is staggering. There are about 350 European soldiers, maybe more. Roughly 2-3 are horsemen, the cavalry elite of the Conquest. The rest are infantry, armed with crossbows, swords, and a few of the clumsy, slow-loading firearms called arquebuses. But the Spanish are only a fraction of the total force. The bulk of the army, its muscle and its backbone, is made up of native allies. They come from Tlaxcala, Texcoco, and other regions, people who'd fought alongside and against. Their reasons for joining are complex. A point historians still puzzle over. Were they truly loyal subjects, coerced vassals, or opportunistic warriors seeking to share in the plunder of these unknown northern tribes? For many, joining the Spanish was simply a better option than staying home under Spanish rule. You wander through the camp, taking it all in. You see the other captains, Coronado's lieutenants, men like Pedro de Tovar, an old hand from the Narváez days, and García López de Cárdenas, a stern and ambitious officer. And everywhere, you see Fray Marcos, HES, the official spiritual guide of the expedition, but HES also its celebrity mascot. He walks through the camp, offering blessings, his presence a constant, living reminder of the glorious city that awaits. He assures everyone that what he saw was real, that their investment of faith and fortune is sound. Here's a quirky detail you notice: the paperwork. This isn't just a mob heading north, it's a meticulously documented legal venture. Before leaving, a grand review and muster is held. An official scribe sits at a table, and one by one, each Spanish soldier presents himself and his equipment. Your name is written down. Your horse is described in detail: its color, its markings, its brand. Your weapons are catalogued. This isn't just for military organization, it's for the final accounting. Every man's investment is being recorded so that the spoils of Chiobal can be divided according to a precise formula. It's a very Spanish way of doing things, a blend of medieval chivalry and bureaucratic pedantry. Finally, the day comes when the Viceroy himself, Antonio de Mendoza, arrives to review his grand army. It's a spectacle of immense pomp. The soldiers polish their armor until it gleams. Banners are unfurled, bearing the royal coat of arms and Coronado's personal insignia. You stand in formation, shoulder to shoulder with men whose faces are shining with greed and ambition. Coronado rides before you on a magnificent charger, his own armor gilded and plumed. He is the very image of a hero. The Viceroy makes a rousing speech, speaking of glory for Spain, salvation for the northern souls, and of course wealth for all. Oaths are sworn. The priests give their blessing. The air crackles with a sense of destiny. Looking at this incredible assembly, you feel invincible. How could anything possibly stand in your way? You have numbers. You have horses. You have steel weapons. You have native allies who know how to wage war in this land. And most importantly, you have God on your side, and the sworn testimony of a holy friar that a city richer than Mexico lies waiting for you. The hardships of the journey, the reality of the desert, the possibility of hostile natives, all of it seems like a trivial obstacle. The outcome is a foregone conclusion. You are no longer just a man with a rusty sword. You are a conquistador. You are a shareholder in a golden enterprise. As the trumpets sound and the order is given to march, a great cheer goes up from the army. The great misguided search for the 7 cities of gold has officially begun. The grand cheer fades, replaced by the rhythmic crunch of thousands of feet on dry earth, the squeak of leather saddles, and the low, endless bleating of sheep. The army moves, and you quickly learn that a glorious expedition on paper is a miserable, plodding beast in reality. The column stretches for miles. From your position somewhere in the middle, you can't see the front or the back. It's a slow, moving river of men, horses, and livestock, kicking up a colossal cloud of dust that coats your tongue and stings your eyes. The banners that looked so heroic at the review now hang limp in the heat. This is the first unspoken truth of the conquest. It is mostly walking, boring, monotonous, soul-crushingly dull walking. Your initial excitement from Compostela lasts maybe 3 days. Then, the daily grind sets in. You wake before dawn, the air cold and damp. You eat a meager breakfast of maize cakes. You check your gear. You march. You stop for a midday meal that is rushed and unsatisfying. You march again until dusk. Your legs aching and your shoulders raw from the strap of your shield or the weight of your harquebus. You make camp, eat another simple meal, and collapse into a fitful sleep, only to do it all again the next day. And the animals, my goodness, the animals. The expedition is a walking city, and a city needs to eat. Behind the main column trails a massive herd of over 5,000 sheep and hundreds of cattle. They are your food supply, your walking pantry. The smell is distinct. In a way, they are the most disciplined members of the expedition, constantly moving forward, guided by native herders. It's a strange and almost comical sight, this medieval European army being followed by a biblical flock, all marching towards a mythical city of gold. The pace is agonizingly slow. The heavy supply wagons, dragged by oxen, constantly get stuck in the mud or break down on rocky paths. The sheer number of people and animals strips every landscape you pass through like a swarm of locusts. You camp by a river, and by the time you leave, its banks are a trampled, muddy mess. You pass a friendly native village, and the army consumes its entire surplus of food in a single evening. At first, the locals are curious, even welcoming, but soon, the mood sours. They see this isn't a passing group of traders. It's an invasion. You start to notice the looks on their faces change from welcome to resentment, and then to fear. Fray Marcos, who had been the expedition's star, starts to lose his luster. He had made the journey sound difficult. Yes, but not this difficult, not this slow. Men start to mutter. They look at the friar and then at the endless, rugged horizon, and the math doesn't add up. Cherbourg seems to be receding with every step you take. The friar, who once walked confidently among the soldiers, now seems to travel closer to Coronado and the other captains, insulated from the growing grumbling of the common soldiers like you. After several weeks of this tortuous scroll, Coronado makes a critical decision. You are encamped at Culicán, the last real Spanish outpost, the very edge of the known world. The main army is exhausted, and the supplies are already running lower than planned. To continue at this pace would be suicide. The entire army would starve long before it reached Cherbourg. So, Coronado decides to split the force. He will forge ahead with a small, light vanguard, an elite group of about 80 horsemen, 24 foot soldiers, his personal guard, and all the friars, the rest of the army, the bulk of the infantry, the native allies, and the slow miners moving Leicester, will follow at a more sustainable pace under a different commander. It's a huge gamble. He is trading safety and numbers for speed, and this is a point where historians still scratch their heads. Why was the planning so poor? Did they truly believe Fray Marcos' story so completely that they thought Cherbourg was just a few weeks' march away? Or was it pure arrogance, a belief that the Spanish were so superior that the logistics would simply sort themselves out? Whatever the reason, you are now faced with the consequences of that faulty planning. A tense selection process begins. Every man wants to be in the vanguard. To be with Coronado means you'll be among the first to see Cherbourg, the first to claim its treasures. It means an escape from the slow misery of the main army. You hold your breath as the captains make their choices, and your name is called. You're in. A wave of relief and renewed excitement washes over you. You are part of the A- team. You leave the sprawling, chaotic camp of the main army behind. Your new group is lean, fast, and driven. The mood is light. Now you can move. You are riding with Coronado himself. Fray Marcos is with you, pointing north, assuring everyone that you are on the right path, that the prize is close. The great weight of the army is gone. Now, it feels like a proper adventure again. You are a small band of brothers, riding into the unknown, leaving the mundane world behind. The desert awaits. Cherbourg awaits. The disappointment, you feel sure, is now behind you. The sprint north with the vanguard is not the easy ride you imagined. The landscape changes dramatically. The gentle, rolling hills of Mexico give way to a rugged, alien world of red rock, steep canyons, and vast, empty mesas. You are truly in the wilderness now, a place that feels like it was baked by the sun since the beginning of time. This is the uninhabited desert Fray Marcos had spoken of, and it is every bit as unforgiving as H.E. warned. In fact, it's worse. The pace is relentless. Coronado pushes the column hard, driven by the friar's assurances that Pueblo is just over the next rise, then the next. Your water-supplied windows, and the water you do find in rock pools is often brackish and warm. The food situation becomes critical. The maize rations are cut in half, then cut again. The men grow gaunt, their faces hollowed out, their armor hanging loosely on their thinning frames. The initial optimism of the vanguard evaporates under the brutal sun. It's replaced by a grim, dogged determination. You have come too far to turn back now. This is when the expedition truly starts to bleed. Men begin to die, not from battle, but from simple starvation and exhaustion. They fall from their horses and are too weak to get back up. In a moment that would have been unthinkable back in Compostela, Coronado gives the order to slaughter some of the spare horses for food. The tough, stringy meat is a godsend, but it's a clear sign of desperation. The ultimate stat, the symbol of the Conquistador for his horse, has become just another meal. You look at your own mount with a new, unsettling calculation. Just as the last vestiges of hope seem ready to flicker out, scouts ride back into camp, their horses lathered, their eyes wide. They've seen it. They found a river, and on its banks, the first settlement. It is, they say, a small city, just as the friar described. A wave of adrenaline, stronger than any food, surges through the camp. Hunger is forgotten. Fatigue vanishes. This is it. Coronado gives the order to advance. You mount up, your heart pounding a frantic rhythm against your ribs, and the column breaks into a trot, then a canter. You race through the final stretch of desert, a desperate, half-minute star of cavalry charge towards a dream. You crest a final, low hill. Below you, nestled in a shallow valley, is a settlement, and the entire column of hardened, hungry men pulls to a sudden, silent halt. It's not a city, it's a village, a jumble of brown, boxy structures stacked on top of each other, clinging to a rocky outcrop. It is not gleaming. It's the color of the dirt it's built from. It is not larger than the city of Mexico. You could probably fit the entire thing in one of Mexico's smaller plazas. The walls are not made of polished stone, but of mud and rock. The doorways are not studded with turquoise. They are just dark, rectangular holes. This is Ku8. This is Pueblo. A profound, stunned silence hangs over the company of soldiers. You can hear the wind whistling through the dry scrub brush. You can hear the heavy breathing of the horses. No one speaks. The collective dream, the magnificent obsession that has driven hundreds of men and cost a fortune, dies in that silent moment on that dusty hill. You look at the Pueblo. It's an impressive structure. Certainly, the houses are indeed multi-minus storied, a remarkable feat of engineering. But it is a home, a community, not a treasure chest. The name the natives used for their lands, Chihuahua, had been twisted by Spanish tongues into Pueblo, a word that now tastes like ash in your mouth. The silence is finally broken by a single, then a muscus from a soldier near you. It opens the floodgates. A wave of bitter, furious rage sweeps through the man. Every eye turns to one man, Fray Marcos. He seems to shrink in his saddle, his face ash. The men shout at him, their voices cracking with betrayal. They call him a liar, a dog, a deceiver. Some men reach for their swords, and for a terrifying second, you think they are going to kill him right there. Coronado's personal guard has to move quickly to surround the friar and protect him from his own flock. You look at the terrified friar, then back at the humble village of Ku8, and the question hangs heavy in the air. Was he a malicious, ambitious liar who concocted this fantasy to win fame and power? Or was he a spectacular fool, a man so consumed by wishful thinking that his mind transformed a dusty Pueblo into a glittering metropolis. It's a question that historians have asked for 5 centuries, and there is no simple answer. But for you, standing there with an empty stomach and a shattered dream, it doesn't matter, liar or fool. The result is the same. The city of gold is a city of mud. The anger on the hilltop is a thick, dangerous thing. It's directed at Fray Marcos, but it's fueled by something deeper shame. You feel it yourself. You are a fool. You sold everything, marched for months, starved in the desert, all for a bedtime story told by a man in a brown robe. Coronado acts quickly. He knows that if he loses control of his men now, the entire expedition will collapse into a murderous mob. He orders his personal guard to hustle the trembling friar to the rear, shielding him from the dozens of starving, wild-eyed men who look ready to tear him apart. Coronado is a pragmatist. His own fortune is sunk into this venture. His reputation is on the line. But rage doesn't fill an empty stomach. The glittering dream may be dead, but the immediate problem is survival. Below you, in the Pueblo, are people, and people are food. He sends a small party forward with interpreters. The lead officer carries a banner and a document. And here you witness one of the strangest and most self-righteous rituals of the Spanish Empire, the reading of the Requiem. An officer, in formal Spanish, begins reading the document aloud to the Zuni warriors who have now appeared on their rooftops, bows in hand. The document explains the entire history of the world according to the Christian faith, from creation to the Pope to the Spanish king. It politely requests that the people of Hawaii you each accept the authority of this faraway king and convert to this unknown religion. If they comply, they will be treated with love and charity. If they refuse, well, the document makes it very clear that any death or destruction that follows will be entirely their own fault. The Zuni, of course, don't understand a word of it. They respond with gestures that are universally understood. They draw their bowstrings and shout warnings. They have no interest in submitting. So it comes to this, not a glorious battle for a city of gold, but a desperate, ugly brawl for a dinner of corn. Coronado gives the order to attack, you and the other soldiers, because you are charged towards the Pueblo. It's a clumsy, chaotic assault. The Zuni defenders have the high ground, raining down arrows and, more effectively, rocks. The Spanish armor that gleamed so impressively back in Compostela is surprisingly poor protection against a heavy stone dropped from 3 stories up. Coronado, leading from the front in his gilded armor, is an obvious target. HES like a shining beacon for every Zuni defender. A well-mined, the same rock strikes his helmet with a sickening thud, and he crumples to the ground, unconscious. Another hits his leg. He is dragged out of the fray by 2 of his captains. His grand entrance into his new kingdom ending with him being knocked cold. For a few terrifying minutes, the attack falters. The captain minus general is down, but the sheer desperation of the starving soldiers pushes them forward. They manage to break through the outer defenses and get inside the Pueblo. The fighting continues, room by room, terrace by terrace, but the Zuni, facing steel swords and crossbows in close quarters, are eventually overwhelmed. After the short, brutal fight, you take stock of your prize. The village is yours, and inside its storerooms, you find the real treasure of Chiobel. Not gold, not silver, not jewels, corn, piles and piles of it, beans, squash, dried meat, and salt. To your starving eyes, it is more beautiful than any precious metal. You and the other soldiers fall upon the food with a desperate, animal hunger. For the first time in weeks, you eat until your stomach hurts. The profound relief of a full belly temporarily eclipses the crushing disappointment. But once the hunger is sated, the bitterness returns. You explore the rest of the Pueblo. You find ceremonial masks, colorful blankets, and small, crudely carved stone figures. You find turquoise, but only in the form of small beads and pendants. Nothing like the gem-studded doorways of the friar's fantasy. This is the entire wealth of the city. The great prize is a few bushels of corn and a handful of trinkets. A few days later, Once he has recovered from his concussion, Coronado makes the inevitable decision. Fray Marcos has to go. His presence is toxic. Keeping him here is a liability that could inspire a mutiny. So with a small escort, the friar is sent back south. In disgrace, his journey home will be one of shame. Forever known as a man whose lies launched 1,000-mile fool's errand. Historians still debate the depths of his deception. Was he consciously crafting a lie for the viceroy? Or did he simply report what he, in his fevered imagination, believed he saw? For you and the other men who bet their lives on his word, the debate is over. He is a liar, and you are glad to see him go. As you watch him disappear back across the desert, you feel a chapter of the expedition close. The fantasy is over. Now, you're just a small, isolated European army occupying a native village in the middle of nowhere, with no idea what to do next. The full bellies last for a few days, but the reality of your situation quickly sinks in. You are a tiny foreign army occupying this small, captured village. The Zuni of Hoi-Kuh have retreated, but they haven't vanished. They watch you from the surrounding mesas, their anger a palpable presence in the vast, silent landscape. The rest of their nation, in other nearby pueblos, is now aware of you. You are isolated, hundreds of miles from the nearest Spanish settlement. With winter approach, the disappointment over the lack of gold has been replaced by a much more primal fear. How are you going to survive the coming cold? Soon, the main army arrives, and if you thought your vanguard looked bad, they are a truly pathetic sight. They have endured the same hardships, but at a much slower, more grueling pace. They are starving, their clothes in tatters, their native allies weary and demoralized. Their arrival doubles your population and halves your precious, captured food supply. Their faces, as they see the meager reality of Chernobyl, mirror the same shock and anger you felt. The reunion is not a joyous one. It's a commiseration of fools. Coronado knows you can't all winter here. Hoi-Kuh is too small, too exposed, and its food stores are already dangerously low. He needs a better base of operations. He sends out scouting parties in every direction. One, led by a captain named Pedro de Tovar, goes west and hears stories of a great river, but doesn't find any wealth. Another, under García López de Cárdenas, will follow up on that report, but the most promising news comes from a party sent east, led by Captain Hernando de Alvarado. Alvarado returns with incredible news. He has found a great river, larger than any you've seen so far, the Rio Grande, and along its banks, for miles and miles, are dozens of pueblos, not small villages like Hoi-Kuh, but large, prosperous towns, surrounded by fertile fields of maize. This is the heartland of a people the Spanish call the Tiguex. Alvarado reports that the people are welcoming and have ample food. It sounds like the perfect place to spend the winter. A flicker of that old, foolish hope returns. Maybe Chernobyl was the wrong place. Maybe this Tiguex province is the real prize. Coronado gives the order. The entire, reunited army abandons Hoi-Kuh and begins the march east. When you arrive in the Rio Grande Valley, you see that Alvarado wasn't exaggerating. It's a far more hospitable land. The pueblos are numerous and well-minus built. The people are worried but not openly hostile. Coronado establishes his headquarters in a large pueblo called Cufort, and this is where the relationship begins to break down. Slowly at first, and then all at once, the cold arrives. Not the gentle chill of a Spanish winter, but a piercing, high-minus desert cold that bites through your clothes. Snow begins to dust the mountains and then blankets the valley floor. You quickly discover that your woolen doubles and steel armor are miserably inadequate for this climate. The native people, with their layered cotton blankets and thick robes of rabbit fur and turkey feathers, are far better equipped. You watch them, shivering, with a growing sense of envy and resentment. The Spanish need winter clothes. Coronado's first demand is for gifts. He asks the Tiguex leaders to provide 300 pieces of clothing for his men. The chiefs protest. This is their entire surplus, what they need to survive the winter themselves. But the demand is not a request. You are sent out, part of a squad going from pueblo to collect the tribute. You walk into a family's home. a warm, subterranean room smelling of wood smoke, and you demand the blankets right off their backs. They comply, their faces a mixture of fear and quiet hatred. You take the blankets and walk back out into the snow, feeling both warmer and colder at the same time. But the blankets aren't enough. The army needs shelter. Coronado decides the army will winter in the Pueblo of Cufo, not just near it. He orders the inhabitants to vacate their homes. Immediately, they are forced out into the bitter cold, with only the clothes on their backs, to find shelter with relatives in other pueblos. It's a brutal, cold act, and it's the final straw. This is the point where the expedition turns from a failed treasure hunt into a dark, undoubtedly war. Historians still debate the precise sequence of events and the justifications. The Spanish chroniclers would later claim it was a military necessity, that they couldn't survive the winter camped in the open. They would also claim the natives provoked the conflict. The native oral tradition tells a different story, a story of unprovoked aggression, of impossible demands, and of a final, unforgivable insult when a Spanish soldier allegedly assaulted a Teaguex woman. Was there one single spot, or was it the crushing weight of 1,000 small injustices? It hardly matters. The result is the same. The Teaguex have had enough. One cold morning, you wait to find that the friendly native vendors are gone. The valley is silent, and you realize that the Teaguex have begun killing Spanish horses wherever they find them grazing. The war has begun. The Teaguex War is not a grand campaign. It's a miserable, brutal siege in the snow. The Teaguex people retreat to a few of their strongest pueblos, turning them into fortresses. You and the rest of Coronado's army, now well minus fed on captured corn but freezing in the harsh winter, are forced to lay siege to these mud-minus brick castles. It's a frustrating, undoubtedly business. The pueblos are difficult to assault, and the fighting is close minus quarters and lethal. The goodwill is gone. The relationship has been poisoned by the demands for food and blankets, the eviction of the people from their homes, and the constant, simmering arrogance of the Spanish soldiers. You spend weeks shivering in the snow outside a fortified pueblo named Mojo. The siege drags on. Men on both sides die from exposure and in vicious skirmishes. This isn't what you signed up for. There is no glory here, just freezing mud, hunger, and the grim task of killing people whose only crime was wanting to keep their own homes and food. It's during this bleak winter of discontent that a strange new character appears in camp. He is a native man, but he doesn't look like the local Pueblo people. He has a different appearance, and he was found living as a captive or slave among the Teaguex. The Spanish can't pronounce his name, so they give him a nickname based on his appearance. They call him the Turk. He looks, to their eyes, like someone from the Ottoman Empire. He is probably a Pawnee or Wichita man, captured from his home on the Great Plains far to the east and traded here. The Turk is clever. He quickly assesses the situation. He sees these strange, bearded men who are obsessed with one thing, yellow metal, and he begins to tell them a story. He communicates through gestures and a quickly minus learned smattering of Spanish, and the expedition's interpreters fill in the gaps. He tells them they are looking in the wrong place. Chiobel, Puja, these Teaguex villages, nothing but far to the east, he says. In his own homeland, there is a place called Quivira, and as he describes Quivira, you can see the old, familiar glint returning to the eyes of your comrades. In Quivira, he says, there is a river 2 leagues wide, filled with fish as big as horses. The lord of that land takes his afternoon nap under a great tree hung with little golden bells that jingle in the breeze. The common people eat from plates of worked silver, and the nobles drink from pitchers and bowls made of pure gold. The word gold, he says, is AC Hosi is. He speaks it with a casual confidence that is utterly convincing. It's an outrageous story. It's Fray Marcos all over again. But this time, the details are even more vivid, more tailored to the specific desires of his audience. And yet, after the crushing disappointment of Chiobel and the miserable stalemate of the Teaguex War, the men are desperate to believe. Coronado brings the Turk to his tent for questioning. He interrogates him intensely. Is he telling the truth? Another Teaguex man, also from the plains, is questioned separately. This man, whom the Spanish call Isopete, confirms that there are large settlements to the east, but he insists there is no gold or silver there. Coronado is faced with a choice. Who does he believe? The Turk, who tells him exactly what he wants to hear, or Isopete, who offers a more sober, less exciting account? The allure of the golden bells and the river of giant fish is too strong to resist. Coronado chooses to believe the Turk. It's a decision that historians still analyze. Was Coronado just a gullible fool, ready to be tricked again? Or was he a desperate leader who saw the Turk story as his only way out? The war with the Tegex is a disaster. It's yielding no profit and costing him men. It's a political dead end. A new quest to the east offers a way to escape the bloody mess he's created in the Rio Grande Valley. It offers a way to restore Moor and give his restless soldiers a new purpose. Here we have a fascinating little academic debate. Was the Turk a brilliant improviser? A captive who saw a chance to lead his captors away from his new home and hopefully get lost in the vast plains, allowing him to escape? Or was he put up to it by the Tegex leaders themselves? Some theories suggest the Tegex elders, desperate to get this Spanish army out of their land, coached the Turk, telling him to invent a story so grand that Coronado would have no choice but to pursue it. Get them out of our valley, send them on a wild goose chase into the endless plains, and let the great emptiness of the continent swallow them whole. Whatever the motive, it works. As spring begins to thaw the frozen valley, Coronado makes his decision. The army will abandon the Tegex region. They will march east, into the great unknown of the American plains. Guided by the Turk, the quest for gold is back on. The nightmare of the winter siege is over. A new dream, the dream of Quivira, has taken its place. As the last of the snow melts from the mountains, the army packs up and leaves the Rio Grande Valley behind. You don't look back. The land of the Tegex is a place of bad memories, a landscape scarred by a war that brought no honor and no profit. The air is filled with a renewed, if cautious, optimism. You are once again marching towards a golden horizon, and your guide, the Turk, walks at the head of the column with a confident swagger. You march east, leaving the familiar world of canyons and mesas behind you. You cross a river the natives call the Icuye, which the Spanish record as the Picos. On its banks sits a huge, impressive Pueblo, the largest you have seen yet. It's practically a skyscraper, 4 stories high, a fortress guarding the pass to the Great Plains. The people here are wary but trade with you for food. They have heard what happened to their cousins in the Tegex Valley. Here you meet Pete again, the other captive from the plains, who continues to insist that the Turk is lying. He gets into a furious argument with the Turk in front of Coronado, but the Turk, charismatic and convincing, dismisses Pete as a coward who knows nothing. The dream of Quivira is too powerful. You push on. Soon, you leave the last mountains behind and the world opens up. The landscape transforms into something vast and empty, an ocean of grass that stretches to the horizon in every direction. There are no landmarks, no hills, no trees, no rocks, just the sky and the grass. You have walked off the edge of the known world and onto the Great Plains of North America. The scale of it is terrifying. The sky feels enormous, pressing down on you. You feel like a tiny insect crawling across a massive green plate. The Turk seems to know exactly where he is going. He leads you steadily, day after day, in a generally east-northeasterly direction. But a strange thing starts to happen. You march all day, and when you look back, your starting point from the morning seems impossibly close. At night, you look up at the stars, and the veteran soldiers who know how to navigate by them mutter that something is wrong. You seem to be drifting south, not east. The Turk assures everyone this is the way. Then you see them. At first, it's just a dark smudge on the horizon. Then the smudge grows, and you realize it's moving. It's an animal, but unlike anything you've ever seen. The Turk calls them cows. They are immense, shaggy beasts with huge humps on their backs and short, curved horns. They are American bison, or buffalo, and there are not just a few of them. There are thousands. Tens of thousands. The herd stretches for miles. A solid, moving mass of animals so dense it looks like the earth itself is shifting. You also begin to encounter people, not the town minus dwelling Pueblo people, but nomadic tribes who follow the great herds. The Spanish call them Quericos. They are probably the ancestors of the Apache. They live in portable tents made of tanned buffalo hides. What you will one day know as Tipes. They are masters of this landscape. They are friendly and generous, sharing what little they have. When asked about Quivira, they confirm that it exists to the north, but when you ask them about gold and silver, they just look at you, confused. They have no idea what you're talking about. Coronado grows suspicious. The landscape isn't matching the Turk's descriptions. Where is the great river? Where are the signs of wealth? ISO peeped. The other guide weeps and begs Coronado to listen to him, insisting the Turk is leading you all to your deaths. The frustration in the army grows. You have been marching for over a month across this endless void, and you are no closer to riches than you were in Chile. Your food is running out again. The Turk's story is starting to unravel. The dream of Quivira is beginning to look just as hollow as the dream of Chiobal. Coronado realizes he has been duped again, and this time, he is in the middle of an empty continent, with a dwindling water supply and an army on the verge of mutiny. The emptiness of the plains presses in on you. The sea of grass feels like a prison, a beautiful, featureless drought. The sun beats down, and the horizon never changes. Morale is at an all-time low. You and your comrades are gone, thirsty and thoroughly disillusioned. You have chased phantoms, Chiobal and now Quivira, and both have led you to ruin. The Turk, who once strode so confidently at the head of the column, is now kept under guard, his credibility shattered. You are camped by a small stream in a shallow canyon, a place the soldiers name the Barracan. It's a temporary reprieve from the endless grass. Coronado calls a council of his captains. The situation is desperate. The army is lost. Supplies are nearly gone, and winter is a few months away. To continue on with the entire force would be suicide. The Turk's lie has led you far astray, into, and that cannot support this many people. Another painful decision is made, mirroring the one at Kilaitan. The expedition must be split. Again, Coronado will make one last, desperate dash to find Quivira. He will take a small, hand-picked group of 30 horsemen and a few foot soldiers, traveling light and fast. They will take ISO Pete as their new guide, who swears Quivira is to the north, not east. They will travel for 40 days. If they don't find anything, they will turn back. The rest of the army, the vast majority of the men, will turn around and attempt to march all the way back to the Tegex Valley, the place of the miserable winter war. The news is a crushing blow. For those, like you, who are chosen to stay behind, it feels like a death sentence. You have to backtrack across that terrifying, empty plain, a journey that nearly kills you when you had a guide and a purpose. Now you must do it with no guide you can trust and the bitter taste of failure in your mouth. You watch as Coronado and his small, elite party ride north, a tiny speck of hope disappearing over the horizon. You are being left behind. Your return journey is a nightmare. It is one of the most remarkable and least celebrated feats of endurance in military history, and it is largely forgotten because it was a retreat. Under the command of Don Tristan de Arellano, the main army turns west, without the Turk deliberately leading you astray. You find the return trip is much more direct, but it is no less harrowing. The plains are a confusing maze. The lack of landmarks is maddening. The chroniclers note about all in telling detail the buffalo dung. On the way out, you had followed the Turk. Now, on the way back, you follow the piles of some minus bleached cow chips left by the army's livestock herd weeks earlier. Your grand quest for gold has been reduced to following a trail of manor back to a place you hate. But your relationship with the plains and its inhabitants has changed. You are no longer just passing through. You are surviving, and you learn that your salvation lies with the shaggy, lumbering beasts you had first marveled at the buffalo. You become hunters. The army organizes massive, coordinated hunts. The horsemen, with their lancers, become surprisingly adept at chasing down and killing the massive animals. It's dangerous work. A charging buffalo can easily gore a horse or trample a man, but it's necessary. You learn to use every part of the animal. The meat saves you from starvation. The hides are used to patch your worn minus-out shoes and clothes. The sinews become thread. You even learn a trick from the Quereco nomads. You use the buffalo's stomach lining as a makeshift canteen to carry water. A foul minus, smelling but life minus, saving invention. This is a cold, hard piece of knowledge that gets little attention in the grand histories. But it's a vital detail of your survival. You, the Spanish Conquistador, are learning to live like the nomadic people you once looked down upon. During this desperate journey, you see the true scale of the buffalo herds. It's not just one large group, it's an endless river of them, for days on end. The horizon is black with them. One soldier would later claim that he saw more buffalo in 15 days than he had seen cattle in a lifetime of living in Spain. They were the true wealth of this land, a mobile, self-replicating source of food, shelter, and clothing. But your eyes, conditioned to see value only in yellow metal, cannot recognize it. You see them only as a means to an end, a way to survive long enough to get back to the familiar world where failure could be nursed and new plans could be made. After a brutal march of more than a month, a scout returns with news. He has found the Picos River. You have made it. You are back on the edge of the Pueblo world. You survived the plains. Now you just have to survive another winter, while you and the main army are fighting your way back west, following a trail of dung across the plains. Coronado is on his own desperate quest. He rides north, his small company of 30 horsemen a tiny, insignificant speck in the vastness of the prairie. His new guide, ISO Pete, is now in the lead, his face set with a grim determination to prove he was telling the truth all along. The mood in this small party is tense. This is the last gamble. Every man knows it. They travel for 40-2 days. The landscape slowly changes. The flat, short-grass prairie gives way to gently rolling hills and lush river valleys. There are more trees, more streams. The land feels more fertile, more alive. It is, by any measure, a beautiful and rich country. But Coronado isn't looking for rich soil. He's looking for rich people. He keeps scanning the horizon for the glint of golden roof. Finally, they arrive. ISO Pete points to a collection of settlements nestled in a river valley. This, he says, is Quivira. Coronado and his men rein in their horses, their hearts pounding with a familiar mixture of hope and dread. They look down upon the legendary land that the Turk had described in such glittering detail, and once again, the dream turns to dust. There is no city. There is no river to leagues wide. There are no golden bells hanging from trees. The great lord of Quivira is not napping under a tree. He is a local chief, distinguished from his tribesmen only by a small copper plate he wears around his neck. The houses are not multi-storied stone palaces. They are large, circular huts, skillfully constructed, but made of nothing more than a grass and sticks. The people, known today as the Wichita, are prosperous farmers. They have good crops of corn, beans, and squash. They are healthy and strong, but they are not rich. They are simple, sedentary people living in a bountiful land. Coronado is a thorough man. He doesn't just look and despair. He spends nearly a month exploring the area, riding from one village to the next. He is in what is now central Kansas. He is standing at the very heart of the North American continent, a place no European has ever seen. It's a land of incredible agricultural potential, a place that would one day become the breadbasket of a nation. But like you with the buffalo, Coronado cannot see the value in front of him. His eyes are calibrated for gold, and there is none. He questions the Wichita people relentlessly. Through ISO Pete, where is the gold? Where is the silver? The ACOC hears that the Turk spoke all. They look at him with blanking compression iron. They have no such word. The only metal they know is the small copper gorget worn by their chief, which they prize highly. It probably came from trade with tribes hundreds of miles away, near the Great Lakes. This single piece of copper is the entire mineral wealth of Quivira. The sheer, crushing weight of the final disappointment settles upon Coronado. He has marched his army thousands of miles. He has spent his own fortune in the viceroys. He has lost men to starvation and, in a brutal, pointless war, he has chased one lie, then another, across half a continent. And for what? To stand in a village of grass huts in the middle of nowhere. The grand expedition is an utter, undeniable, catastrophic failure. It's here that we encounter another one of those academic arguments that feel so distant from the immediate reality of the failure. For centuries, historians and archaeologists have debated the exact location of Cabeza. Based on the expedition's chronicles, they have traced Coronado's route and argued over which specific river valley in Kansas holds the remains of the villages he visited. Was it near modern Minas-Day, Linsport, or further east, near the Great Bend of the Arkansas River? It's a puzzle of terrain, native accounts, and Spanish measurements that continues to fascinate researchers. But for Coronado, standing there in 1541, the precise longitude and latitude of his failure were of little comfort. He has a formal ceremony. He claims the land for Spain, a hollow gesture performed in front of a few dozen exhausted, disappointed men and a handful of bemused Wichita farmers. He has nothing to show for his efforts but a new, vast, and apparently worthless territory on the king's maps. The dream is dead. It has been killed 3 times now, once on a hill overlooking the mud walls of Chiobal, once in the snows of the Tigres Valley, and now, finally and irrevocably, in a grass hut on the plains of Kansas. There is nothing left to do but go home, and to deal with the man who sent him here. Before Coronado can begin the long journey home from Cabeza, there is one last piece of business to attend to. Throughout the journey north, his men had kept the Turk in chains, dragging him along with the small company. No, in the heart of the land that was supposed to be his golden kingdom, he is brought before Coronado for a final reckoning. The confrontation is grim. There are no more illusions, no more hopes to cling to. Coronado, through an interpreter, demands to know why. Why did he lie? Why did he invent this elaborate fantasy and lead the entire army astray into the plains, to the brink of starvation and death? The Turk, saying that the game is up and his life is forfeit, finally confesses. His story comes tumbling out, a tangled web of desperation and conspiracy. He admits that the story of Cabeza as a city of gold was a complete fabrication. He had never seen such a place. His descriptions of the golden bells and silver plates were pure invention, things he imagined would appeal to the Spaniards' obsessive greed. But his motive is the most shocking part. He claims he was not acting alone. He says that the Pueblo chiefs back in the Tigres Valley, specifically at the large Pueblo of Picos, had put him up to it. They saw how desperate the Spanish were to find wealth. They saw that Coronado's army was a destructive force, a plague upon their land. So they devised a plan. They would use the Turk as their instrument. They coached him, telling him to invent a story so irresistible that the Spanish would have to follow it. The goal was simple and ruthless, led the entire army out into the Great Plains, the vast, empty quarter of the continent. Let them mark on mark until their food ran out and their horses died. The Great Plains would be their grave. The plan was that the Spanish, weakened and scattered by starvation, would be easy prey for the plains tribes, or would simply perish on their own. And if, by some miracle, a few survivors managed to struggle back, they would be so broken that the Pueblo warriors could finish them off easily. It was, in its own way, a brilliant piece of strategic mythical, a desperate gamble by a people facing an overwhelming foreign invasion. Is this story true? This is one of the great lingering questions of the expedition. The Spanish chroniclers who recorded the Turk's confession seemed to believe it. It explained everything, and it conveniently shifted the blame for their own gullibility onto the treachery of the natives. It painted the Turk not just as a liar, but as an enemy agent. But modern historians are more skeptical. Was the Turk telling the truth? Or was this just one last, desperate lie? An attempt to deflect blame, or perhaps even to sow more discord between the Spanish and the Pueblo peoples. It's possible he invented the conspiracy story on the spot. It's also possible he was a lone agent, a clever slave who saw a chance to lead his captors on a fool's errand in the hopes that he could escape in the confusion and find his way back to his own people. His true motivations, whether he was a pawn, a patriot, or a simple opportunist, died with him on the plains of Kansas. Coronado listens to the confession. His decision is swift and brutal. There can be no tolerance for this level of deception. Justice, in the 16th century, is a stark and simple thing. He convenes a brief trial among his captains. The verdict is unanimous. The Turk is sentenced to death. That night, you can imagine the scene. There is no formal ceremony, no gallows. The sentence is carried out quickly and quietly, so as not to alarm the local Wichita people. A rope is looped around the Turk's neck. He is Garrett, strangled in the silence of the vast Kansas night. The man who had, for a few brief, glorious months, held the fate of a great European army in his hands. The man who had invented a kingdom of gold out of thin air, dies unceremoniously in the very land he had promised would make everyone rich. His body is buried in an unmarked grave. His story is over, and with his death, the last, lingering flicker of the golden dream is finally, violently extinguished. You are back in the Tegex Valley, and the land feels heavier than before. The novelty of survival has worn off, replaced by a bone-minus deep weariness. It's the autumn of 1541. You and the main army are rebuilding your old, miserable camp near the Pueblo of Cufo. You are waiting for Coronado and his small party to return from their wild goose chase to Cabeza. Every day, you scan the eastern horizon, half minus expecting to see them, half minus dreading the news they will bring. The local Tegex people watch you with cold, unforgiving eyes. You are unwelcome guests who have overstayed your welcome, and everyone knows it. The days are long and tedious. There is nothing to do but mend your rotting gear, tend to the emaciated horses, and tell stories. And you have a good one. You were part of another side quest, another one of the dozen gambles Coronado made after the disappointment of Chiobel, before the disastrous march east. While the Turk was just beginning to spin his tales, Coronado had sent other scouting parties out from Chiobel, desperate for any lead. One went east to the Picos Pueblo, another went west. You were in that one. Your commander was Captain García López de Cárdenas, a stern, no-minus-nonsense officer. Your mission was to investigate rumors of a great river to the west, stories brought back by a previous scouting party that had visited the Hopi mesas. The Hopi, whom you called the people of Tusayan, had told your comrades that further on, there was a river so immense it carved the very earth into. With a small company of horsemen and a handful of Hopi guides, you set out. You rode for 20 days across a high, arid plateau. It was a beautiful but desolate land of painted rock and ancient, twisted juniper trees. The Hopi guides were patient, leading you onward with a quiet confidence. They kept pointing toward the horizon, but you could see nothing. No mountain range, no line of trees indicating a river valley. Nothing, just flat, endless land. Then, one afternoon, the guides stop. They make a gesture forward. You ride up alongside Cárdenas, peering into the distance. And you see nothing. The ground simply ends. You dismount, your heart suddenly beating a little faster, and walk to the edge, and you stop. Every thought in your head coming to a screeching halt. The world falls away. It is not a cliff. It is not a valley. There are no words in your language for what you are seeing. Before you is a gash in the surface of the planet so vast, so deep, so utterly silent and overwhelming that it feels like a wound from God. The earth has been torn open, revealing layers of red, orange, and purple rock that plummet down for what seems like an eternity. A mile below, a thin, brown ribbon of water glints in the sun. That is the great river. It looks like a tiny thread from this height. You are the first Europeans to ever lay eyes on the Grand Canyon. For a long time, no one speaks. You just stand there, small and insignificant on the rim of this impossible abyss. It's beautiful, terrifying, and profoundly alien. But Cárdenas is a practical man. The mission was to find the river, and now they must reach it. You need to get to the water. For 3 days, Your party scours the rim, searching for a way down. The cliffs are sheer, a maze of vertical drops and crumbling ledges. Finally, Cárdenas selects the 3 lightest and most agile soldiers. Their task is to try and climb down. You watch as they begin their descent, quickly becoming tiny figures against the immense rock face, before disappearing from view altogether. Hours pass. The sun beats down. Just when you begin to think they have fallen, you see them, climbing slowly back into view. They collapse on the rim, exhausted and defeated. They tell their story, their voices full of awe. They only made it about a third of the way down. The scale is deceptive from the rim. High rock that looked to be the size of a man from up here. One of them pants was taller than the great tower of the Cathedral of Seville. They could not reach the river. It was impossible. And so, after 3 days of staring at one of the greatest natural wonders of the world, you turn your back on it. This is the ultimate symbol of your entire expedition. You have found something magnificent, something beyond the scope of human imagination, and it is completely and utterly useless to you. You can't cross it. You can't drink its water. You can't farm its canyon floor. And most importantly, there is no gold glinting in its walls. It is a worthless spectacle. A beautiful, gigantic failure. This is the cold fact that historians know. But you feel it in your bones. You discovered the Grand Canyon, and it was a bitter disappointment. The memory fades, and you are back in the T-Gex Valley. The wind is cold. You look at the mud-minus brick homes of your enemies and think of the canyon. A useless wonder. It feels like a fitting metaphor for this whole sorry enterprise. You are still waiting for your general to return from chasing his own useless wonder on the plains. The autumn air grows crisp, and the first hints of winter return to the T-Gex Valley. Then, one day, a lookout spots a small group of riders approaching from the east. It's Coronado. He and his small party are back from Quivira. You watch as they ride into camp, and you know instantly that the quest has failed. There are no victory cheers, no triumphant banners. The men are gaunt, their faces grim, their shoulders slumped with the weight of a final, crushing disappointment. The gilded armor Coronado wore with such pride 2 years ago is now dented, rusted, and stripped of all its glory. The reunion with the main army is a somber affair. Coronado confirms what every earnest scout already told them. Quivira was another lie, a collection of grass huts. No gold, nothing. The news runs with a thud, not a shot. No one has the energy left for rage. All that remains is a hollow, empty feeling of defeat. The entire enterprise, from the first whispers of Geobal to the last stand at Quivira, has been a complete and total bust. You settle in for another miserable winter in the T-Gex Valley. It is, if anything, worse than the first. Last year, you were sustained by a flicker of hope, the promise of Quivira. This year, there is nothing. The camp is rife with discontent. The soldiers are ragged and homesick. Fights break out over trivial matters. The relationship with the local T-Gex people is one of pure, cold hatred. They refuse to trade, and any soldier who wanders too far from camp risks ending up dead in a ditch. You are an occupying army in a land that wants you gone, with no reason to stay and a long, dangerous road home. The monotony is broken only by Coronado's own restlessness. Even after all the failures, a part of him refuses to give up. He still thinks that maybe, just maybe, there's something further on. A few priests in the expedition, driven by missionary zeal, are eager to return to Quivira to try and convert the natives. Coronado seems to consider it, planning a second, better minus-equipped expedition for the following spring. But it's a fantasy born of desperation, and everyone knows it. The men will not follow him on another wild goose chase. They just want to go home. Then, fate intervenes. One day in late December, Coronado is out riding with a friend, engaged in a mock tournament, a game of horsemanship to relieve the boredom. As he gallops across the frozen fields, the cinch on his saddle suddenly breaks. He is thrown from his horse, directly into the path of his friend's charging mount. A hoof strikes him squarely in the head. He is carried back to camp, unconscious and bleeding. For days, he lies near death, suffering from a severe concussion. This is the same type of injury that knocked him out at the battle for Hoi Kuh, and the cumulative effect is devastating. He eventually regains consciousness, but he is a changed man. His mind is slow, his speech is slurred, and he is prone to fits of deep depression. The ambitious, charismatic leader who had inspired you to follow him to the ends of the earth is gone, replaced by a broken, melancholy invalid. The injury becomes the final, unarguable reason to abandon the quest. The captain-general is in no condition to lead. He officially cancels the planned return to Guevara. The army will go home. The decision is met with a quiet, weary wave of relief. In April 1542, after 2 long and fruitless years, the order is given. The army packs up its meager belongings and begins the long march south. The journey home is the saddest parade you will ever witness. It is the opposite of the glorious procession that left Compostela. There are no gleaming banners, no proud speeches. You are a ragged, defeated army, limping home in disgrace. You have nothing to show for your efforts but scars, worn minus-out boots, and empty pockets. You have to trade with native tribes along the way for food, begging for sustenance from the very people you had planned to conquer. The native allies who had accompanied you with such high hopes are now depleted, disillusioned, and far from their own homes. It's a long, slow, and humiliating retreat. A few men, mostly the priests who still dream of saving souls, decide to stay behind. They are choosing almost certain martyrdom over the shame of returning home a failure. You watch them go, admiring their faith, but questioning their sanity. For you, all you want is the familiar sight of a Spanish settlement, the taste of Spanish wine, the sound of your own language spoken without the need for an interpreter. You march south, you're back to the great northern mystery, a land that promised you everything and gave you nothing but hardship and sorrow. The slow crawl back to New Spain feels longer than the entire journey north. Every step is a reminder of your failure. When you finally cross the border out of the wilderness and straggle into Culican, the first Spanish outpost, there are no welcoming committees. The settlers there look at you with a mixture of pity and contempt. You are the men who were supposed to return laden with gold, heroes of a new empire. Instead, you look like beggars. Your clothes are patched with animal hides. Your armor is gone or rusted beyond recognition, and your faces are burned by the sun and etched with disappointment. The final leg of the journey to Mexico City is even worse. News of your failure has preceded you. As your ragged column approaches the capital, you can feel the mood of the entire city. The investors who poured their fortunes into the expedition, the wives who waited for 2 years, the officials who dreamed of a new tax base, they are all united in their bitter disappointment. When you finally march into the Plaza Mayor, the silence is deafening. There are no cheering crowds. There are no celebratory cannonades. There is only the shuffle of your weary feet and the averted gazes of the people you left behind. Of the 350 Spanish soldiers who marched out with such pomp and pride, barely 100 are left. The rest are dead, deserted, or have chosen to remain in the wilderness rather than face this public humiliation. For Francisco Vázquez de Coronado, the homecoming is the beginning of a long and painful end to his career. Viceroy Mendoza, his friend and primary investor, is furious. He lost a fortune on this gamble, and his political reputation has been tarnished. He gives Coronado the coldest of receptions. The once -dashing captain-general is now a broken man, both physically and mentally. The head injury has left him with chronic pain and a deep, unshakable depression. He is no longer the ambitious young star of the colony. He is a walking symbol of the greatest financial and military fiasco in the history of New Spain. The inevitable legal process begins. In the Spanish Empire, every expedition, successful or not, was subject to a residencia, a formal judicial review of a commander's conduct. Coronado is stripped of his governorship of Nueva Galicia. He is put on trial, facing charges ranging from incompetence and mismanagement of funds to cruelty against the native peoples he encountered. You might even be called to testify, to recount the events of the Tigre War or the execution of the Turk. Here lies one of the final ironies of the story. Coronado is eventually cleared of most of the serious charges. The court finds that while the expedition was a failure, He had largely acted as a man of his time was expected to. The cruelty was deemed a regrettable but necessary part of conquest. His real crime, the one for which he would never be forgiven, was not cruelty, but failure. He failed to find gold. He spent the rest of his life in relative obscurity in Mexico City, a minor city council member, forever haunted by the shadow of what might have been. He died just over a decade later, a wealthy man thanks to his wife's inheritance, but a broken one, his name forever synonymous with a grand and spectacular failure. So was it all for nothing? For you, the common soldier who returned with empty pockets and a lifetime of debt? The answer is a simple, bitter yes, but historians, with the luxury of hindsight, have a more complicated view. The Coronado expedition was, without a doubt, a financial catastrophe and a human tragedy. That it was not without consequence. For the first time, Europeans had traversed the American Southwest. They had seen the Grand Canyon, the Great Plains, the immense herds of buffalo, and the complex societies of the Pueblo peoples. The reports and chronicles from the expedition, particularly the detailed account written by Pedro de Costaneda, provided Spain with a wealth of geographic and ethnographic information. It effectively popped the bubble of myth that had driven exploration for decades. After Coronado, no one would seriously search for the 7 cities of gold again. The dream was dead, replaced by the hard, geographical fact that the interior of North America was not another Mexico or Peru. It would be centuries before the true value of the lands you crossed the fertile plains of Kansas, the ranching lands of Texas would be realized. You were the first to see it, that you were looking for the wrong thing. And that, perhaps, is the final, quiet tragedy of this grand, misguided journey. The sun is setting on your memories now, casting long, soft shadows over the high deserts and endless plains. The sharp edges of failure begin to soften, smoothed by the gentle passage of time. The clatter of armor fades into a distant echo, and the angry shouts of disappointed men are carried away on a wind that whispers through the tall grass of Quivira. You can feel the weariness in your bones, a deep and settled thing, but it is no longer the frantic exhaustion of the march. It is the quiet fatigue at the end of a very long story. The faces of the men you knew, of Coronado, of the Turk, of Fray Marcos, begin to dissolve like smoke. The brilliant, impossible gleam of Chernobyl, as it existed in your mind, has long since been replaced by the honest, earthy brown of a Pueblo war at sunset. You are no longer in the Teaguex Valley, shivering in the snow. You are somewhere warm and safe now. The dust of the trail no longer cakes your throat. The gnawing hunger has been replaced by a feeling of deep, quiet rest. The journey is over. The striving has ceased. All the desperate hope and the crushing disappointment has settled. Like silt at the bottom of a slow moving river, there is nothing left to search for. The greatest treasure, you begin to realize, is this quiet, this stillness, this gentle descent into a peaceful, dreamless sleep. The end of the article. Good night.